Okay, we're back, and we will move on to the next submission by the Green Party of Ontario as outlined in CMD 12H13.208. I understand that Mr. Schreiner will make the presentation. Please proceed.
Good afternoon, members of the Commission and Mr. Chair. My name is Mike Schreiner. I'm leader of the Green Party of Ontario, and I appreciate the opportunity to express my concerns with Ontario Power Generation's plans to refurbish and keep the Darlington nuclear reactors running until 2055. I believe the environmental assessment report has failed to properly address a number of concerns regarding the risk of continued operation of Darlington. I do not believe that approvals for the refurbishment of Darlington should be granted until these concerns are satisfactorily addressed. My first concern is with risks associated with public safety and short and long-term environmental damage. I'm deeply concerned that OPG has inadequate plans in place to protect human health or the environment. Significant nuclear accidents are happening around the world about once per decade. It is essential that Canada require the highest level of risk assessment and safety protocols, especially since reviews of nuclear accidents at 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, and Fukushima demonstrate that institutional failures and human error are contributing factors. OPG's Darlington Nuclear Generation Station Risk Summary Report indicates that accidents involving large radiation releases are realistic, though remote, possibility. Given the catastrophic risk associated with nuclear accidents, especially on the doorstep of Canada's most populated region on the shores of Lake Ontario, I am deeply concerned about insufficient emergency planning procedures at Darlington. It is irresponsible and unacceptable that the worst-case accident examined by OPG in its application would involve a release of radiation traveling about 3 kilometers from the plant. I believe history demonstrates that this is insufficient and puts the public at risk. And I believe governments must act to ensure that public safety is a top priority. A more thorough and rigorous analysis of risk and emergency planning should take place before proceeding with any approvals at Darlington. Further complicating this, in my mind, is that OPG is not held financially accountable for the full cost of a nuclear disaster. The Nuclear Liability Act means that in the event of an accident, OPG would not pay more than $75 million for environmental cleanup or victim compensation. Failure to hold the industry accountable for risk misrepresents the economics of nuclear power and is a disincentive to creating the full risk avoidance policies. Before OPG is allowed to proceed with their proposal to rebuild Darlington, I believe OPG and its suppliers should assume full financial responsibility for any accidents or mistakes. In addition to taking action to protect the public from disasters, OPG must also take steps to mitigate environmental damage from ongoing operations. As you've heard previously, Darlington uses Lake Ontario as a source of cooling water and a dump for wastewater. It is also a major source of thermal and chemical pollution in the lake. This causes significant harm to aquatic systems, killing fish and fish habitat. Before receiving any approvals to proceed, OPG must have plans in place to mitigate thermal and chemical pollution, fish kills, and stormwater discharge into Lake Ontario. Additional public safety and environmental risk exist because the nuclear industry has not finalized a comprehensive plan for dealing with nuclear waste. Meanwhile, the amount of waste continues to grow. OPG is unfairly placing the burden to monitor waste onto future generations. As the risks and costs associated with waste management and decommissioning continue to rise, it is unacceptable and irresponsible to proceed with refurbishment until proper storage and decommissioning plans are in place. My second concern is related to financial risk. No nuclear project in Ontario's history has come in on budget or on time. The existing Darlington reactors were supposed to cost $4 billion and ended up coming in $10 billion over budget. I realize that today we're talking about refurbishment and not new build, But the record for refurbishment is not that good either. The recent refurbishment at Bruce Nuclear is at least $2 billion over budget and 3 years behind schedule. The estimated cost of rebuilding CANDU reactors has ballooned over the past decade from approximately $800 million per reactor in 2002 to $2.5 billion today. Ontario ratepayers are still paying for the debt associated with previous nuclear projects. I believe it's unacceptable and irresponsible that the Ontario government has no plans in place to protect ratepayers or taxpayers from further nuclear cost overruns, including overruns associated with the refurbishment at Darlington. I believe it is inconceivable that the government has not conducted an independent and transparent review of nuclear costs. The cost to refurbish Darlington estimates vary widely between $8 and $14 billion. And just last week, Standard & Poor's rating service downgraded OPG's credit rating from stable to negative, in part because of the risk of cost overruns due to the Darlington refurbishment. Approvals for Darlington should not be granted before a transparent and independent review of costs take place. My third and final concern is related that the failure to mitigate safety, environmental, and financial risks by not looking at alternatives. I believe it's irresponsible to proceed with Darlington until a thorough review of alternatives has taken place. And I know it's not your job to examine alternatives, but I think it's inconceivable that the Ontario government over the past 7 years has prevented any public reviews of the need for or alternatives to nuclear power at Darlington. Some people ask, I believe, the failure to consider that the cheapest and greenest source of electricity is a power we don't use in the first place. Estimates are that we could retrofit 2.3 million homes in Ontario to save the same amount of energy we would get from Darlington at half the cost. Alternative sources of generation exist. Made in Ontario water power, wind power, and bioenergy all offer lower cost and lower risk sources of electricity than rebuilding Darlington. The cost of importing water power from Quebec is less than 1/3 of the cost of Darlington. And right now we have existing transmission lines in place to replace 75% of Darlington with power from Quebec. The city of Guelph alone has 60 megawatts of renewable energy applications awaiting approval at the Ontario Power Authority. This is just the tip of the iceberg of what's possible if we empower communities to generate electricity and jobs, instead of proceeding with mega projects that have mega risk, requiring mega capital costs, and generating mega amounts of waste. The responsible course of action is for the Ontario government to conduct a thorough review of safer, cheaper, and cleaner alternatives before proceeding with the Darlington refurbishment. In conclusion, I am deeply concerned about OPG's plans to refurbish the Darlington nuclear reactors. I believe the risk and the costs of nuclear are too hard to justify. More affordable, reliable, and safer alternatives exist. The Darlington refurbishment should be halted until the need for alternatives to and public safety, environmental risk, and costs of nuclear are fully and independently considered. Thank you for your time and consideration today.
Thank you. Question?
Just a comment, except for the costs, which is not our mandate. I think all, if not of your concerns, have been largely discussed during the last 3 days. So I don't know if you were here or, but so.
I decided to not go into detail on some of those because I know other presenters have raised some of those issues. So I decided that I would go into more detail in some other areas. But I do want to reinforce the fact that I've had over 400 letters sent to me, people expressing concerns for this particular project and asking me to speak out about it.
Judge Giese?
Yes. Could the OPG tell us what's covered by financial guarantees? Because the intervener is talking about decommissioning or radioactive waste disposal. What's covered?
Pierre Tremblay for the record, just to make sure I'm understanding you. You're talking about the segregated funds themselves and in terms of what's included?
Yes.
Okay. Well, specifically, the waste itself, the low, intermediate, high-level waste, as well as the decommissioning costs associated with the existing facilities. And that includes not only the OPG assets, but the Bruce Power facilities as well that are still owned by OPG.
I think the intervener argues that the actual costs of refurbishment are not really known. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that was one of the comments he made, and I wonder if you can address that. Is that not what you asked?
It is one of the questions I've asked. I did raise concerns as well about the unknown nature of decommissioning and waste costs. So I believe all those costs are unknown.
Right.
Pierre Tremblay for the record, and so as the Commission knows, and we've appeared before you on an ongoing basis, decommissioning plans are required to be, produced and re-examined, I believe, on a 5-year frequency. We have individuals who can speak to more details, but those are in fact reviewed and kept up to date based on specific conditions and based on benchmarking of well-documented costs, both in North America and globally. We keep close tabs on that. So maybe Terry Dorn can just elaborate briefly for you.
Terry Dorn for the record, just to summarize. So in October of this year, OPG presented in front of the Commission the financial guarantee cost estimates for the period of 2013 through 2017. In that submission, it's a detailed breakdown of the decommissioning costs, the used fuel management costs, and the low and intermediate level costs. And as previously mentioned, we update these estimates through the province of Ontario, who independently audits our submissions on a 5-year frequency.
Thank you. Dr. McDill?
Thank you. It was a long time ago, but could I ask OPG to remind me, as I say, it's a while ago, what some of the cost overruns were way back when Darlington was first constructed, the 4 to 10 that the intervener has raised. Those were safety requirements.
Sure, Pierre Tremblay for the record. There were a number of issues associated with the new construction of Darlington. The project was delayed a number of occasions. There were some issues associated with vibration heat transport system that required some redesign, and there were also some stops and starts to the project, which of course led to accumulation of interest charges and so forth. So that's kind of generally the story.
Thank you.
Okay, you did mention that you accept that it's not our mandate to deal with alternatives, and I hope you can engage your colleagues on some policy discussion that should be done in the political arena and not in these particular hearings. Please.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I will be and have been and will continue to engage my colleagues in that conversation. I do think that this group does have a public responsibility to inform the public of risk and also the fact that there are alternatives to those risks. And so that's why I think it's important to bring them up in these hearings.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.